Making finance work for Africa. This is a key element in the push for development within the continent. My guest today is the formidable Marina Finken. She started out her career in consulting and is currently the head of the Making Finance Work for Africa initiative at the Africa Development Bank. She is truly passionate about making an impact and encouraging a positive shift in the mindsets that have long held us back on the continent, particularly in the area of finance. On this episode, we spoke about the various areas relating to finance in Africa that urgently need our attention and action. Honestly, it was a great conversation that I deeply enjoyed, and I hope that our listeners enjoy it just as much. So, welcome, Marina. Thank you for coming on here to be a guest on the iCAN podcast. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm very honored that you thought about for this. So thank you for having me, Torera. And it will be my pleasure to share my humble experience with you on my work and everything else related.
Yes, I mean, first of all, being too humble right now because if I start reading out what you do, yes, I'm pretty sure our listeners would be very impressed by the work you do. So, I mean, just jumping in really quickly, and there's a usual format we have on the podcast because part of it is also just spotlighting a bit of INSEAD on this podcast as well, and so prior to, I just want to like learn a bit more about your journey prior to INSEAD, then what made you go to INSEAD, and then your journey after. So, you know, just all ears.
Okay, so my journey before INSEAD, where should I start? So before INSEAD, I was working in audit and consulting firm, PwC to be precise. And what I was doing, I was providing advisory services to company, mainly financial institution on accounting issues and regulatory issues, especially for banking institution. At this time, there were a new accounting standard, IFRS 9, which came with a lot of changes for banks in the way they did things, in the way they will lend to real sector company, the way they will manage the credit risk, and most importantly, the way they will report to it. Big change, and for me it was an opportunity because before that I was working at audit, and when this new accounting standard came around, for me it was an opportunity to switch and getting into very technical accounting and financial issues, helping banking institution coming around this new standard, and also helping other kind of institution outside the financial industry in the fundraising operation when they're going to raise money on capital market. Reporting communication is very important, and especially you need to obey by your firm standard, and I will also help them. So for me, it gave me a very good everything I did before in period. I will say it was for me a great way to learn and to develop some technical skills. First, an audit. I learned the banking sector with that working in the banking sector because I was auditing the banking institution. So I got to understand them, and have a really a good point of view to have a broad overview of the operation, getting understanding. And later on, when I move on in advisory services, I got deeper in technicalities around finance and accounting. So everything I did before INSEAD, I managed to develop these technical skills in finance, in the banking operation, and it was very fulfilling. But at some point, at some point in your career, it's always about, okay, what will be the next step? And for me, now that I had the technical skills and manageable as well, because, on some projects you don't need to, you have to manage small teams. The next step was not that obvious. I feel that I wanted something at the same time more and different at the same time. So in PwC, the next step will be to continue to raise and ultimately become a partner. And I was like, okay, is it really what you want? You know, there was just something would wasn't there. And I started to have this reflection. And for me, it came very obvious that I need to open more my perspective because I was really specialized in the financial sector in some technical functions. And I need maybe to have a broader perspective and to decide what will be the next step in my career. And at the same time, I was also really willing to work on developing regions Africa because for personal reason. I was born in Cameroon, I live in Benin, and actually I left Africa after high school to study in France and I started working in France. So there was some part of me which still there because you know, in my generation when you live Africa to study in France. The objective is always okay, you gain every professional skill that you need, and then you come back to Africa. And I was like, okay, it's been almost 10 years now, you're still there. So there was also this voice inside me, you know, the continent kind of calling back for me, okay, you need to come back there. So there were also that, and you need to come back to contribute in addressing, you know, development issues on Africa, what will be the best way, etc. So all these questions ultimately led me to INSEAD to facilitate this professional transition and with the objective also to come back to Africa. This was a very strong objective and see what will be the best way to do that. So for what I was looking for in INSEAD, as I said, it was really about broadening my perspective, acquiring new skills, not necessarily technical one because I already had them, but you know, take about strategy, high level management. It was also for me a good opportunity to network, meet people not working necessarily in the same field than me, and also learning from them. And I was hoping that within this journey of 1 year and a half, I will find, I won't say my voice, but yes, it will, I will manage to make this transition, whether it's just geographical or both functional and geographical, whatever. But this were the kind of thinking which led me to fear.
Is this is really I what you said, first of all, I like the journey you've had because it's definitely been a very interesting one. Starting as a basically a consultant and audit and from you understanding the auditing of financial services to being part of financial services and, you know, particularly in such a crucial space such as development finance. So when you left and came into development finance, what would you say has been the learning? How has it been for you coming to development finance from your background?
As you know, as you may have seen from my profile, after INSEAD, almost immediately after I came into this new position within the African Development Bank and more precisely the Making Finance Work for Africa. And I think I changed almost everything because I remember when I was discussing with counselor within INSEAD, you know, in terms of my professional transition, this okay, when you think about this transition, there are three areas, the technical, the geography, and then the sector. So for me, the sector was audit and advisory, functional consultant, and geography Europe. And I changed the three because I came back to geographic, I left Europe to Africa. In terms of function, it wasn't consultancy anymore. And I think, and so my sector was consultancy, audit and advisory, but the only thing I kept was the focus on the financial sector because before, when I was working in audit and advisory, I have always audited financial sectors industry, and I chose this sector many years ago after my study. The main reason, one thing which has always been important for me when we talk about my career is the opportunity to learn, lifelong learning, and also the opportunity to have some kind of a very broad overview of the economy. And I think working in the financial sector gave me that because financial sector is very catalytic. You know, you are financing various industry and you are, and that says you are really at the heart of the economy. And I think this is why I have always been attracted in the sector and I chose to specialize in it even when I was working in a big four firm. And when I transited and came back to Africa, I kept this. I kept the focus on the financial sector, which I believe is indeed a key area when we speak about the development of Africa. The financial sector is key because it's basically the bridge. Financial sector is what an efficient financial sector which allow to move capital where it's needed. And I wanted to keep the focus on financial sector. Initially, I was looking for position into commercial banks, financial institution, the AFCB, of course. But the development aspect was not necessarily a target. And I had this opportunity to join the African Development Bank, and especially working with indicators really about how we can make sure that the Africa financial sector works to address Africa's most pressing challenges. And for me, it was a really good opportunity because I found this aspect I have always been keen on, the learning aspect, because you will have a very broad overview of the financial sector. It's not only banking, it's also capital market, it's also insurance, it's also fintech, which is very rising on the continent, and engaging with various stakeholders to find the solutions, catalytic solution, to find a way to mobilize local resources in Africa so that it will go where it's needed to finance infrastructure, to finance SMEs, to finance young entrepreneurs, etc. So the focus on the financial sector remained there, and I think in a way that made it kind of easier because it was a very big transition. As I said, I changed the tree every year, and people say you can change the tree every year, focus on one and the others will come after. But I managed to change the tree. It was a big transition, but having this focus on the financial sector, which I learned to know very well when working in audit and advice of a firm, made the transition very easier. And I saw how the financial sector can work efficiently in developed country. And I was really happy and I welcomed the opportunity to also make it work in continent so that we can ensure that it will have a catalytic force of financing economies and ultimately make Africans' life better. So yes, this is. I hope I answer your question. I'm speaking a lot in
No,
the
you
beginning.
definitely did. You did. I mean, first of all, I'm enjoying just listening to you. Something that you say, and this is me speaking as someone who's an African who loves Africa, who has like projects I do and things I commit to in Nigeria. You know, I'm from Nigeria, but I don't physically live in Nigeria. I haven't made the move back. And something you said that I've it just, you know, has been on my mind that you said was you were in France for about at least 10 years and then you made the move back. You made the change, like I said, across all three sides, so geography, function, industry. Something, the conversation that has just, I found has been resonating a lot with a lot of people I know that are passionate about Africa and but are in still in the Western, you know, in Western countries, has been the conversation about moving back. Now, how did you find moving back? I feel like some listeners who are possibly thinking about moving back within the next short term, maybe 1 year, 2 years, how have you found the transition from working, living in France, in a Western country, and then, and for such a long time, and then moving back to Senegal? And just how have you found that?
Thanks for the question. So it's in Abidjan. I'm in Abidjan, Ivory Coast.
Oh,
Not, no, no, that's fine. That's fine. No, they're very close by. So Senegal is it's within 2 hours by flight. So that's fine. So I think to answer to that, maybe I should also point out something. I explained my motivation to move back to Africa, for professional aspiration, but there were also personal reasons behind it. And I think I need to be honest. The personal reason first, I was from Africa, as I said, I'm from Cameroon. And also, I'm a mother of 3 kids now. During said I only had, if that's the right term, but I only had two girls, quite young. And I know, you are living in London, so you can imagine how challenging it can be raising children in Europe. You're always raising one time. So also for personal reason, because here in Africa you can find help in a more affordable way, which is not always the case in Europe. So I was also feeling this stress of being a mother raising children in Europe, always from work to kindergarten, then coming back home, start cooking for the kids, etc. And also I was also was also one of the reasons I wanted to get back to Africa, because I felt that it will be easier for me as a mother to find the balance between my work and being a mother and taking care of my family. And as I was raised in Africa, I also wanted my kids to be raised in Africa and being close to my parents, which are still living in Cameroon. So there were also personal reasons behind this. Only in Africa, there were both personal and professional reasons. So, and why I wanted to point that out, because I think that this personal reason kind of make it easier, because indeed, from a professional perspective, it's challenging making this kind of transition, because you are working into a new environment. You need to get used to new ways of doing things, and you need time to adapt yourself, but you don't necessarily have this time, because when you are entering a position, there are some expectations around it. You do need to deliver, but at the same time, you are discovering a new environment. So this can be challenging. And for me, I think that the professional challenge was kind of counterbalanced by the personal. It is easier here. Let's just say that it's kind of easier being a mother here in Abidjan than in Africa. I have a full-time nanny, which I couldn't necessarily afford in Europe, even if I had a very decent salary. But the reality of Europe just made it that it's difficult to have full-time help. Here it's the case. And now, as I said, now they are three, they are not only two. And it's easier. I think that I have more time with them. And the time I have with my kid is really a time I have, to discuss with them, to have a fruitful exchange with them. And when I try to compare with Europe, it's not necessarily, I think that this is my case. I'm not saying that that's the case for every mother. Obviously, I think that others managed it much better than me. But when I was in Europe, at some time, I feel that whenever I was with my kid, I was just taking care of them, and I was not spending time with them. For me, it was very frustrating, and even for them, because the exchange, the time that we had together can be very, it's always okay. Do that. Go do your homework. Go take your bath, and you are not really spending time with them. And here, I think I managed to find this balance, and it's really fulfilling. And it definitely helps with the professional challenges, which are there at the beginning. But it's like every LS, you find your way. You find your way. I think it's important to acknowledge that yes, you are coming in a different environment. It's also important to acknowledge that you don't know everything. Not having this kind of thinking, okay, I'm coming from Europe, I've been working 10 years in Europe, now I'm coming in Africa, so I know better. I think this is very dangerous to have this kind of thinking, and be ready to learn from others. And I think for me, this really helps the transition, because as I said, learning is an important part. I need to know that in my position, I learn every time, every day. I need to learn, not only from my work, but also from the people I'm working with. Having this very open-minded behavior, I think, in a way, helped the transition, because I came very ready to learn from other, and not necessarily to impose a way of thinking. And yes, I think that made it easier. The challenges was there, but yes, I think the personal gains and the open-minded attitude, and being aware that yes, the transition that you're making is quite huge. So be open, learn from others. All of this made it easier. And it's been 2 years now that I came in Abidjan, and no regrets so far. No regret.
So, I mean, first of all, your humility and open mindedness is something that I've just picked up as a strong trait with you. And I think, like you've said, it's definitely helped you with your transition. And something that you said that just resonates with me, and I think because I've also having that same conversation with a lot of people, is I think, I mean, you probably agree with me, but in Africa, in African countries and societies within Africa, community is a stronger thing. We have like more support around us. We have more of a support system. We have more of and it's I guess as well like I said, it's also cheaper if you also need to employ someone to support you. And I imagine that that's something that's so important as a career-driven woman that you know you want to find that balance between motherhood and career, and you don't want to, and especially talking about that, we're coming to the end of Women's History Month, but it's such an important thing, right? Um, and so I'm glad that you found more of a balance between career and motherhood in African, like in Abidjan. I feel so embarrassed that I said Senegal before, but in Abidjan I don't even know why I said Senegal. I don't know why I was thinking Senegal, but yeah. But yes, and then so it's really something that's beautiful because I was talking to a lady yesterday. She's a partner at McKinsey and partner at McKinsey in Africa, and she's when I say in Africa, because she's currently the head of financial services across Africa. That's why I'm using the term, not that I'm throwing Africa into one big.
Yes. I can't find the name. She's living in
Yeah,
Nigeria,
she lives in
right?
Nigeria,
Yeah.
Mayowa. I'm pretty sure.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes. So I had a conversation with her yesterday. I just like I met her in person. That was a really good conversation we had. And it was just, that whole thing, like you said, like balanced lifestyle, to be honest, as a woman as well. Because in the West, you find that you juggle so much and you're having to do practically everything yourself, a lot of things yourself, and it does have its side effects. It has its repercussions, especially on, like I said, your relationship with your kids and building that relationship with your kids. I grew up in Lagos. I moved to UK at 19, and my mom too, very much a career driven woman, and that was a big thing for her as well, building a relationship with her kids. So I remember many days I would literally be in the car with my mom reading a book while she's reading the brief of her work. So yes, I can completely imagine. I just want to talk about your work with Africa, your work within the Africa Development Bank, so making finance work for Africa. How, something that I was thinking about as well, and I'm not sure how much this affects your work, but you know how the end of USAID and just the overall reduction of aid towards from Western countries to African countries. What would you say has been the knock-on effects so far? And what would you say is the potential, like what potentials do you then see for this?
I'm laughing because I was discussing, obviously, this is a topic which is much discussed currently, and just 2 days ago, I was discussing it with friends. So, from my case, it does have an effect in my work because the initiative I'm leading within the African Development Bank is supported by grants. And it was actually founded in 2008 with GIZ, which is like the German effect, if I could say that, and other donors. And there are many initiatives here which are supported by grant from donors, from development agency, from developed country. Trust fund. We generally call it trust fund within the AFDB jargon. So yes, I think it will have an effect for all of this, and especially making finance work for Africa. So as I said, we are trying to bring systemic change in the Africa financial sector so that it will respond more to the needs of Africa. And we are doing this through soft activities, if I could say that, through gathering knowledge, insight to share with stakeholders, trying to influence regulators, trying to strengthen the capabilities of the actors, also trying to foster collaboration, network, etc. So all these kind of soft activities were very much supported by grants. And I think that generally speaking, even before we had this big announcement from USAID, there was already this trend of decreasing grants from development agency in developed country. It just took a very significant turn in 2025. So yes, definitely it will have an impact on from in my work and the kind of support I can get for initiative, and more generally in AFDB, the kind of financial support that we could have for this kind of initiative, and trying to work at the ecosystem level where we really count on grants. But in my personal case, since my mandate is the financial sector, I think we can have a more positive effect is that now we are going to acknowledge more the importance of developing our own financial sector. Because when you look at Africa, whether you speak about infrastructure and other financing needs, let's say, for example, infrastructure. Infrastructure in Africa is mainly funded by foreign direct investment, development assistance, by MGB, such as the Multilateral Development Bank, such as the African Development Bank or IFC, etc. But we have been discussing a lot of how we can mobilize financial resources in Africa to also finance this infrastructure. And trust me, these financial resources are there because, we only think about Africa. Yes, we are a developing continent, but they are pool of capital, financial capital, sitting here in Africa, not only within bank, with in Africa are mostly over liquid, but also within institutional investors, pension funds, insurance company. This pool of capital is not optimized for it, because when you look at this institutional investor, they mainly invest in government bonds. But if we can manage to allocate part of the investment in infrastructure, in what we call alternative investment, it could be infrastructure, it could be a private equity, it could be thematic bonds such as free bond, etc. I think that will make a change. And this is why one of the things I have been advocating for within making finance work for Africa. One aspect, how we can develop local capital market, how we can make banks more efficient so that they will also lend to SMEs. This is really what we are fighting for within making finance work for Africa. And of course, it didn't start with me because I joined almost 3 years ago. But those are the kind of discussion we have been in the development world for such a long time now. And my hope is that with this signal that we receive from our friends across Atlantic, and it's not alone, by the way. Maybe it's the noisiest one, but it's definitely not the only one. Other developed countries also announced significant reduction of the development assistance into Africa. And again, this is a trend which started many years ago. Not only development assistance, which are grants, but also direct investment decreasing in Africa. So I think now more than ever, it's really time to focus on developing our financial our own capital market, so that we can mobilize local financial resources here to finance whatever needed to be financed, infrastructure, SMEs, education, youth, entrepreneurs, etc. Of course, it won't be sufficient. I said that there are a pool of capital in Africa. We will still need foreign direct investment, but if we manage to mobilize more our own local financial resource, I'm really sure that it will also attract more investment from outside Africa. So to answer your question, definitely we will have a kind of negative effect because we will have less development assistance to support our work. I'll also take, behind every challenge, there is an opportunity. So I really hope that we will also harness the opportunity to start to focus where we should focus. And personally, as I'm working in financial sector development, I see that a very great opportunity to work more to make it happen. And it can make a difference.
Indeed, indeed, what you said, behind every challenge, there's an opportunity. And there's something that, this going along the line of trying to encourage more indigenous investment as well. So like you said, like Africans putting their money into the financial system. And I believe that, so I've worked in financial services in the West. And one thing I was having a conversation with years ago with somebody I know that worked in CBN, so Central Bank of Nigeria, was the conversation around regulation. So I find that most investors, they want to they want to have trust in the system. They want to have trust in the fact that if they put their money in the system, it's protected by the regulators, and the regulators have strong tools that they're using to ensure that there's a fair play. What would you say within the regulatory system, how far we've gotten and what steps we need to put forward, that regulators need to put forward to encourage that trust in the system and just encourage more indigenous investment?
So yes, that's a great question, and one I'm very happy about because we are working a lot with regulation because just like you said, the regulatory environment is very important. And finance is about trust. With that trust, you can have finance. So the role of the regulator is quite important. Central banks for banks, microfinance, and now fintechs, and also capital market regulators. And I think from what I am observing within my work. First of all, we had made significant progress in terms of regulation of the financial sector. Of course, there can be some discrepancy from a country to another, but definitely a good process. Just one example, most central banks here in Africa now adopt the Basel principles, which is also a good sign of regulation and the fostering trust among stakeholders. And central banks, African central banks are organized within an association, the Association of Africa Central Bank, which is one of the stakeholders we are working quite closely with. And within this association, Making Finance Work for Africa established years ago a network of banking supervisors. And they do have three working groups around various things to always think of what can be done better to ensure both financial stability and also to ensure that the environment within a financial institution are working with is quite friendly, will promote investment, etc. Yes, so in a way, they have been significant progress, and I think we can salute that. There's still much work to do. For example, let's speak of fintechs, which is a new game player here within Africa with great potential to foster financial inclusion and to address some of our very persistent challenges in semi-finance, for example. And we discussed, you mentioned Mahoma, the lady from the McKinsey in Nigeria many years ago under her leadership. The McKinsey had a study on the fintech. I can't remember the exact title, but basically they were analyzing how fintech have moved from a niche to a very important players, and they salute the progress, but they also identified four main challenges for fintech, African fintechs. And two of these were related to financial regulation and governance. So, and those is quite important for fintechs, a very barrier for fintech to scale up, basically. And fintechs are regulated by central banks. Sometimes, I think one of the things, for example, with regulator and more specifically central banks, is really proportionality. I think this is really where we should focus our effort to bring in some proportionality and try to avoid as much as possible over regulation. And this is the challenge for central banks, find this balance between financial stability, but also to promote innovation and to promote investment. And the key is to have proportional regulation. Some jurisdiction, for example, you don't have a specific regulatory framework for fintechs. They have to obey by the same rule as banks, which is really, as you could imagine, we are not very sustainable. And this is one of the things we are trying to promote with Africa Central Banks. We are also working with the Africa Fintech Network, which is based in Nigeria and also have this advocacy role for central banks. So this is a network that we support and to see how we can advocate to central banks so that they will foster a more enabling regulatory framework for fintech while maintaining financial stability, which of course is demanded, and try to avoid regulation. I took the example of fintech, but you can observe it in other areas. 2 weeks ago, I was in a conference organized by GIZ, and we were discussing agriculture, and the same subject came up, the regulation, and we had this microfinance mentioning that the know your customer rules by central banks is just too complicated adapted and not necessarily adapted for African realities. So I think that to summarize my answer to your question, great progress. It's always important to salute the achievement and the progress. So obviously, I've been working for only 2 years now, but I think that there have been great progress and there are solid foundation in terms of financial sector regulation. But we need to continue, and the challenge now is really this proportionality. Are we trying to make sure that we are not over-regulated ourselves and that we also foster innovation? And I think also important for central bank to have kind of a development mandate. It's not only about financial sustainability, but also having a development mandate to encourage banks and all the financial institutions that they are regulating to actually work for the economies they're working in. And another example, we know that, banks in Africa, uh, unfortunately, as they continue to significantly invest in government bonds. While we have this pool of SMEs, we need financing. So I think central banks should also reflect on how they can create good incentives for this financial institution to divert a little from government bonds, which is important, sure, but to also allocate more funding to private sector. And it's about how to make it so that it makes sense for them. Not only say, okay, you know what, please give money to SMEs, they need it. But how can we make sure that it makes sense for a bank to actually lend money to SME in a financial sustainable way? That's a good challenge. And it requires acting at very level, at the ecosystem level, including from the SME perspective as well. So, and this is also, so I would say proportionality and also incentive, good incentive for financial institutions so that they can play their role and that we stop having it's too risky, it's too risky. I was discussing with a friend just 2 days ago, friend from ICAN actually, and we had this discussion. Say, yeah, it's too risky for a bank to lend to an SME. At some point, it's the role of a bank to take risk. It's part of this is your job for a bank when you're a bank and when you're working in finance. Finance is a balance between return and risk. So yes, too risky. I think we need to see how we can change this mindset and find the right the great balance between risk and financial return. And in that sense, central banks and other market regulators have a great role to play.
Honestly, I love what you said about incentive, proportionality, and ecosystem. And talking about ecosystem, I love the conversation around ecosystem because, okay, I'm not trying to come across as negative or even shaking the table, but I was thinking about this was a while back as well, about the idea of conflict of interest, especially with central banks, right? So one of the key things that central banks obviously is monetary policy, among other things. And sometimes I ask myself, and please feel free to correct me, about the conflict of interest of the firm, the institution that has been mandated to oversee monetary policy, but also being the ones to deal with the intricacies of regulation and banks playing fair. And the only reason why I say this is I'll use Nigeria as an example again, because it's my dear country. But when it comes to around conflict of interest, right? So imagine if someone who was working in a commercial bank, so I'll just say commercial bank A, I'm not calling any bank's names, was a director there, and then moves on to central bank and becomes the regulator of bank A. What are the chances that the conflict of interest, the person, the new director, has friends and colleagues and all sorts in, his former employer, Bank A? And that conversation around conflict of interest is something that's so interesting to me because what in your opinion could be done? Because I've seen it play out. I've seen that conflict of interest happen. What would you say could be done about that?
Great question. And this is, you mentioned an example in Nigeria, but we can observe it in various countries. And, related to this specific example, my immediate reaction is that to do that in the first place, Then there should have been something preventing him to immediately transit from commercial bank to central bank. I don't know if a delay was observed because you can say, okay, you need to wait for 5 to 10 years before making this kind of transition. So for me, there's already an issue here in the fact that he was actually allowed to immediately move from a commercial bank to central bank. And yes, I completely agree with you. There's definitely a conflict of interest here. My answer to your question, I think this is for me a topic I am getting very passionate about because now that I'm working in Africa and I am learning and we often discuss about all the challenges face Africa. We compare Africa to other developing regions in Asia, Latin America, who made it somehow. And we are sitting here to a continent we host most of the natural resources, which host the youngest population in the world. We host, all this potential, but for some reason we are still, and sometimes because I know that the world is a very complicated place. Economic relation is very complicated, but sometimes I think that let's just try to simplify things. And I often ask myself, how come the continent which hosts most of the natural resource, which hosts the youngest population, how come we are the less developed? I try to explain my in not that in the end, and I think the answer is the governance. And I think many people will agree with me. In Africa, if you are not, we need to find a way to tackle the governance issues. And for me, the example that you just mentioned is the governance issues. It's a governance issue, and unless we are tackling that, we are making progress. Thank God, we are making progress, but they will still be slower than the progress that we should have made because of given everything we had, we should be much more advanced in our development. And I was discussing it because I wrote a blog. That was the first time because one thing I am observing here in Africa is a very positive trend around everything sustainable finance and ESG frameworks, which is great. And this blog, I was kind of deploying that we need to find the model which work for us, not necessarily copy paste model outside. So, and when we speak about sustainability, environment, social, and governance framework, I think the focus initially was on environment for obvious reason because it's a very important trait. And sustainable finance really started with a focus on environment, and it was the case in Africa as well. But when we speak about environment in Africa, the fact is that Africa does not contribute that much. So we should not have the same perspective. And my point is that maybe the focus should be in governance because ESG is environment, social, and governance. And the good thing is that yes, we start with a focus on environment, but at some point we realize that okay, maybe the focus should be on social because from environment, the issue is more about adaptation, not transition, because we are not contributing so much. You can see the focus. We can observe a shift from a strong focus on environment to more and more social. And I was thinking, yes, but governance, should we give more emphasis to governance because this is a big issue in Africa, and I believe if we manage to tackle this issue, it will unlock a lot of things. And I was thinking that, and I made some research on the internet, and I was very happy to see that there is a financial instrument to that. It is Sri Lanka, which issues end of last year, a governance-linked bond. And I thought, okay, this is it. So it does exist. So we can find a financial mechanism to also address some of the governance issues that we are facing in Africa. Sorry, I'm debating a lot from your question, but yes, I think my answer to that, yes, conflict of interest is governance, and we do need to pay more attention on governance issues. My personal opinion is that we are not doing that alone enough. Sorry. If we don't, for example, let's talk about finance. Governance is the very constant of finance. If you don't have a good governance, if a company does not have a good governance, it cannot go to the market. And we always think about SMEs like in finance, but the SME, does they have a strong governance to go to capital markets, for example, no things like that. So yes, I think we really need to pay more attention on governance at every level, not only in the public space, but also in the private sector, so that we avoid this kind of situation. And if you have a good governance framework in place, normally a former CEO from a commercial bank should not move immediately to a central bank. So definitely there's something to do here.
I absolutely love what you answer. And please don't worry about like going on about bringing because I mean, firstly, I'm very passionate about finance. I've worked in finance since my whole career actually, but in different parts of finance. And so when meet someone like yourself who's doing amazing work, I just want to engage and and so it's something that, like you said, the G in ESG is what our focus in Africa should be when it comes to finance. Um, at least, I mean, ESG is fine. The environmental and social are very much important, but like you said, the most immediate is governance. For the fact that we want people to invest, we need good governance. Um, so I just want to move to, because I'm slowly coming to the end of this record. And for me, just one of the things that what would you say is, and this is like a question within a question, but firstly, what would you say if you could change and improve just one thing within making finance work for Africa, the financial services within Africa? What's that one thing you would love to change? And within that question, anyone who is looking, so Africans in diaspora who are equally passionate about finance and contributing their expertise, what would you say they should look into? What would you say is a very key area for them to research on?
Okay, so one thing I will change in the Africa financial sector. Wow, that's
Don't worry, I can make it more than one thing, but what's the most important thing?
I think the governance issue I just mentioned will be something I will, and not only the government, also the mindset, and I think that is something I would like to. The mindset of doing business and how you measure risk, etc. This is something I will really like to see a change with governance from both sides, not only from financial sector actor, but also actually from the one who need it from the one we needed. So yes, because we do need efficient financial system in Africa, that's for sure. And we have all this pool of capital sitting here, but it's just not moving. And we try to find solution to incentivize the people, and I think it's very often it's also a question of mindset. Just to give you one example, many years ago, not so long. So I'm sitting here in Abidjan, and we have the stock exchange, BRVM. They wanted to create a channel dedicated to SME, so that they will have SMEs also listed on capital markets. So with the support of the African Development Bank, they incubated, I don't remember exactly, I think 20 SMEs, and so that they gave capacity building on how you can be listed, how you can raise equity capital on capital markets, and it was the elite program who lasted for a while. I think they had the support from FDB, 500,000, something like that. And at the end of the program, not one SME actually went to the market. So and I was discussing with colleagues from BIBM and say, okay, what happened there? Because for me, it was such a great initiative because, SME finance is one of the topics I'm very passionate about. And I often say that stop looking only on banks. Banks are not the only finance, they're also capital markets. So for me, it was such a great initiative. And I tried to understand why it did not work, because you delivered all this capacity building, you incubate SMEs, etc. And at the end, no one actually go through the process. Was it too difficult for them? Did they need more advisory services, things like that? And I think the answer was that no, they just don't want to give up control and equity. So that's why I said, okay, maybe that's something we need to change in the mindset, because indeed mostly many SMEs in Africa are family owned, and it could be difficult they really want to keep 100% of the chairs, and they don't necessarily have the mindset of thinking that, let's say 70% of a bigger pie is better than 100% of a pie, something like that. So I think that the mindset, we need to keep working on the mindset and foster, I won't say good business, yes, good business practices, sustainability, etc. And when you think about that mindset, governance, etc., it's education. So we need definitely to continue to invest in education at every level, starting when people are young, of course. But as I mentioned, I'm all about learning, lifelong learning, and I think that you never stop learning things. So we need to continue to invest in education. I think that's something we definitely continue to need on the continent to foster this good mindset and friendly environment.
I love the fact that you focus a lot on mindset and education and governance. But like you said, mindset education. Because like you said, it's really the foundation, I would say, for building more. So I guess like if SME give an example of they have a better mindset and have clearer education understanding of how the financial services and banks and loans can actually help them achieve their goals better, then they'll most likely be more open-minded to it. And so what would you say? I feel like I'm asking another question on top of that. But when it comes to education, because it's like, where do you start? Would you want to start with like adult education, like they already, or just a mixture of like is it through schools? What would you say would be the best way to actually put forward this education?
I just finished a book from a very impressive Nigerian lady, Ahunma Ute, and the title of the book is All Hands on Deck. And I think it quite reflects my answer. It else everywhere, and just for this lady, very impressive. I don't know, maybe she was the former CEO of SSC Nigeria just after the financial crisis. So she used to work at the African Women Bank, and then she moved to FFC Nigeria at a very critical time with the mission to completely change the financial sector, the capital market in Nigeria, which were going through a lot of things. So she explained that in her book. She also explained the importance of capital market. Many of the things we just discussed and very impressive lady. And one of the things she mentioned when she came to FFE Nigeria, she really put an emphasis on financial literacy. It is related to education because she said it's important to foster a common understanding of financial not only to the market players but actually at the school. And she within the SSC, she put in place some progress financial literacy courses at school, and she organized some competitions around that with awards, etc. Quite interesting, and this is building for the future. And as I mentioned, Africa will host almost half of the youngest population by, if I remember well, the statistic by 2050. So it's important to invest in the very young population. So education is key. And having this good governance practice and mindset, yes, definitely you need to start young. It's easier actually to learn that younger because the difficult to change some of the assumptions that you had, which was fostered at a very young age. But at the same time, part of what I am doing within my work, it's capacity building, try to raise awareness within market players on some topical issues and actually deliver some training so that they have a better understanding. For example, we talk about sustainability, ESG, we try to make a financial institution to better understand the between sustainability and financial wisdom so that they won't have the impression that they are sacrificing the financial return for sustainability, something like that. So definitely, I think you need also some education at every level, and I think she find the right word, all hands on deck. We need to all work on that. We all need to also be intentional about that, about learning and being quite open-minded, observing what is going outside of Africa in other developing countries so that we can assess what should be done from our side, what will be the best model for us. And if us in FIAD, it's all about lifelong learning. We all need to do that. So yes, education at every level, but when it comes to mindset, governance, I think the sooner you start, the better. So that you already grow with that mindset, because having to change mindset and assumption at the adult age, it could be tricky.
I completely agree. I understand what you're saying and I completely agree. I mean, I love what you said. I've loved this conversation we've had and you're keeping us within our time limit and knowing that you have a very busy day. Or at least you're ahead just to go ahead with your day. The very last time, because this is the iCAN podcast, and one thing I've picked from you is you're definitely someone who's a driven person who has you set your mind to it, you have a vision and you go after it. And that's what's brought you to being the head of making finance work for Africa. So what would you say is your can? Like what's been the thing that drives you?
What is driving me? No, indeed, as you said, I think that I like to set myself objective and then give everything to achieve it. And I think that that's the common trait to all in theater, because if you go through such a program, it shows that you have a certain level of ambition. And I think, when you're evolving in your career, in your life, it can change. And for example, when I started my career, what was driving me was really about, learning and have a fulfilling career and learning, being expert on something, being knowledgeable, if I could say that. And then it changed and it's more about having an impact. And I think this is what is continue to driving me now, is having a positive impact around me through my career, having a positive impact. It could be an immediate impact to the people I'm working with. I like sharing my experience, with my colleague. If I can learn, if I can share my knowledge, and I think that's something many of my colleagues acknowledge me for. Having some kind of a pedagogical approach the way I interact with the people I'm working with. So having a positive impact on my colleagues, making sure that they are working within a safe environment, that they're feeling secure and safe enough to share the idea, to test new things, etc. Also having a positive impact on the society I am working with. And that is one of the reasons I am so passionate about sustainability topics, because I think this is where you can find the nexus between doing business and also at the very minimum do not significantly harm the society you're working with, not if they have a great significant impact. And I think the willingness to have this positive impact, this is what led me to the development world. Of course, contribute to the development of Africa, and making sure that I am doing my part so that I will leave a kind of better world for my children and all these young people which are coming. So yes, I think to answer your question in a nutshell, what is driving me now is really having this positive impact and making sure that I am doing my part. I am doing my part because I think that generally speaking, I had the opportunity to study abroad and, for example, to do in India to meet people, and I feel that I also need to leverage on all on that to also having a different impact and also making sure that I'm doing my part so that other people who don't necessarily have the opportunity can have access to this at a later stage in their life. So yes, I'm all about impact driven people.
I love it. I love it
Making
because what you said is that one, you're a lifelong learner. And I think that's such a common trait, like you said, with INSEAD, people who choose to go to INSEAD. And two, impact. I feel like anyone that thinks Marina Finken, like you said, think impact, think Marina. Um, but yes, no, obviously, I've loved this conversation, and it's really been a pleasure speaking with you. It's been a pleasure talking finance, talking making finance work for Africa. And I mean, from speaking with you, I know that you set your mind to it and you will achieve the goals you set out for making finance work for Africa, because like you said, it's catalytic, right? It's a catalyst for growth. And like you said as well, it's important. We are the continent with the most resources. We should be able to harness our resources to achieve the growth that we want to see. But yes, just rounding up. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for speaking with me. It's really been an honor speaking with you. I know you're so humble, but honestly, it's been an honor.
Thank you very much for thinking of me. And Jeff, maybe want to take the opportunity to think that the work that you are doing within iCAN is just amazing. And thank you for having this initiative. I think that we need that. We need to collaborate more within the infield alumni, which are interested in Africa, not only because you were born with Africa, but even if you are not from Africa, if you have a significant interest from the continent, I think that having this collaborative platform is very great. That's something that we need. So thank you to you, to all the leadership team from ICANN, Isabel, Tabo, etc. You are doing an amazing job. And it was really my pleasure to have this conversation. I'm looking forward to the opportunities to support the work that you are doing with ICANN, because we definitely need that.
We will definitely be partnering more. Say, don't worry, we'll definitely be partnering more. And I appreciate what you said. I sincerely appreciate what you said. I'm sure Tabo and Isabel, when they're listening, this will put a huge smile on their faces. Yeah. All right then. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of the iCAN podcast is brought to you by the INSEAD Change Africa Network. I'm your host, Torera. Until next time, for the good and greatness of Africa.